For 15 long years, the janitor walked through the company halls every single morning, carrying her quiet strength like a shadow that no one cared to notice. She was always the first one in and the last one to leave. She scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, wiped spilled coffee from desks, and kept the building spotless. Most people didn't even know her name. They called her the cleaning lady, the janitor, or simply ignored her as if she was just another piece of furniture. But she never complained. She moved with gentle steps, calm eyes, and a patience that surprised anyone who paid close enough attention, which was almost no one. Her uniform was old but clean, her shoes worn down from years of walking the same hallways. Every morning she tied her curly hair into a tight bun and whispered a small prayer before starting her day. She always greeted people with a soft good morning, even if they didn't look up from their phones or computers. Some answered her with a polite nod. Some didn't bother to respond. Some pretended not to hear her at all. But she never let their coldness change her warmth. She believed kindness was never wasted. Someone always needed it even if they didn't show it. What no one knew was that behind her soft smile and quiet steps, she watched everything. She saw how employees treated each other. She remembered who held the elevator for others and who pushed past without saying sorry. She noticed which workers stayed late to help teammates and which ones pretended to be busy. She knew who was honest, who was loyal, and who only acted nice when the CEO was watching. And most of all, she studied the CEO himself. How he spoke, how he led, how he treated people who had less power than him. She saw things no one else noticed because no one noticed her. People assumed she lived a simple, struggling life. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know she once wore business suits instead of a janitor uniform. They didn't know she built something important long ago. They didn't know she had signed documents that could change everything. They didn't know she had more keys to the company than the CEO did. They didn't know she walked these halls not because she had to, but because she chose to. She chose this life. 15 years ago, she made a decision no one would have understood at the time. She stepped away from her position quietly and walked into the company as a janitor instead of an owner. She wanted to see how people acted when they thought no one powerful was watching. She wanted to understand the soul of the company she had created. She wanted to see who deserved a future in her business and who didn't. Staying hidden gave her the freedom to observe human behavior in its purest form, without masks, without lies, without fake smiles. But no one knew this. To them, she was invisible. Sometimes when she swept the lobby, executives walked right past her while discussing million-dollar deals. They never imagined the woman with a mop in her hand once sat in the boardroom designing the company's future. When she took out the trash, managers complained loudly about her being too slow, not knowing she once managed more employees than any of them ever had. When she quietly disinfected the CEO's office, he often ignored her completely, scrolling through his emails as if she didn't exist. He never knew the woman cleaning his desk had the legal authority to take that desk away. There were days when her heart felt heavy, not because of the work but because of the way people judged her. She saw the pity in some eyes, the disdain in others. She heard whispers like, "I could never do her job," and "what a sad life." She also heard jokes she pretended not to hear. But through it all, she remained calm. She didn't let their ignorance hurt her. Instead, she learned from it. She used their behavior to understand the true character of the people she employed. Even though she walked quietly, she carried wisdom stronger than any title. She knew more about the company's problems than most supervisors. She understood which departments needed leadership changes. She knew which employees deserved promotions but were being ignored. She even knew that the CEO, who acted like the company was his personal kingdom, was slowly destroying the culture she had once built. But she kept her identity hidden. Some evenings, after everyone left, she walked through the empty halls and touched the framed photos on the walls. Photos of the company's earliest days, photos she once stood in but had been edited out of over the years. She smiled sadly but never felt regret. She had chosen this path and would continue until the right moment came. Among all the people in the building, only one young employee ever talked to her kindly. He always offered her help carrying heavy boxes. Another older woman always greeted her with a warm smile. A few security guards treated her with respect, and she remembered each of them. Their kindness stayed with her like precious gems hidden in her heart. 15 years of silence. 15 years of watching. 15 years of carrying a secret larger than anyone could imagine. And while the company laughed, worked, complained, and moved on with life, no one knew the truth. The quiet woman pushing the cleaning cart, the janitor they overlooked every day, the woman they believed had no power, was the real owner of everything around them. And soon, very soon, The day would come when the world inside that building would finally learn who she really was. The CEO arrived every morning with loud footsteps and a louder ego. He wore expensive suits, shiny watches, and a smile that only appeared when powerful people were watching. To everyone else he showed his true face, cold, dismissive, and impatient. He believed he built this company with his own brilliance, forgetting that the Real foundation was laid long before he arrived. He didn't know that the woman sweeping the floors had signed his very first contract. He didn't know she was the one who wanted to give him a chance. He didn't know the person he ignored could remove him with a single signature. Every morning, when the janitor greeted him softly, "Good morning, sir," he barely lifted his eyes. Sometimes he pretended not to hear her at all. Other times he made comments under his breath like, "I don't know why we need so many cleaning staff," even though he was talking about just one person, her. Employees noticed the CEO's behavior but said nothing. Some copied him. They believed if the CEO didn't respect the janitor, they didn't have to either. They walked past her quickly, expecting her to move out of their way. They spoke in loud, rude voices as if she didn't have feelings. But she remained gentle, her eyes soft, her voice calm. She had learned long ago that people with weak hearts often hide behind loud anger. Yet there were moments, small, quick moments, when she almost revealed the truth. Like once, when the CEO shouted at her because a trash bin wasn't emptied fast enough. She looked at him, her eyes steady, and said softly, "One day, you will understand who truly keeps this place running." He laughed at her then, thinking she was just being dramatic. She turned away quietly, fighting the urge to tell him that she could fire him with a single phone call. The CEO believed he owned everything: people's time, people's energy, even their respect. He walked through the office like a king, speaking down to employees who worked double shifts to meet deadlines he didn't care about. He never remembered birthdays, never thanked anyone, never apologized. Under his leadership, the company felt colder each year, like a building slowly losing its warmth. But the janitor saw everything. She saw the young intern who cried in the bathroom because the CEO embarrassed her in a meeting. She saw the older accountant who worked late every night but never received recognition. She saw the security guard who offered her a donut because he noticed she skipped lunch. She saw the receptionist who always said hello with a real smile. She remembered their kindness, their dedication, their humanity. Meanwhile, the CEO kept making decisions that hurt the company. He approved fancy renovations no one needed but refused to upgrade old computers employees struggled with. He hired friends instead of qualified candidates. He wasted money on expensive parties while cutting staff bonuses. Slowly, the company began to crumble under his poor leadership, but he blamed everyone except himself. Whenever things went wrong, he pointed fingers. "It's the manager's fault," he said. "It's the employees' laziness." Never once did he wonder if he was the problem. One afternoon, during a busy workday, the CEO stormed out of his office because the printer jammed again. He walked into the hallway and almost stepped on the janitor's cleaning cart. Instead of apologizing, he glared at her. "You need to move this thing out of the way," he snapped. She looked up at him slowly. "Sir, I was cleaning the area. I'll move it in a moment." He rolled his eyes. "You people always have excuses." For a second, something sharp and painful flashed inside her chest. "You people." She swallowed the hurt and said nothing, but that moment stayed with her. His disrespect was no longer just careless, it was cruel. Later, in a meeting with upper management, the CEO bragged loudly about how he was the backbone of the company. He praised himself for saving the business, when the truth was the opposite. Meanwhile, the janitor swept outside the meeting room, listening quietly, shaking her head. She could have walked inside, placed her documents on the table, and ended his speech in one breath. But she didn't. Not yet. She believed in timing. She believed the right truth revealed at the wrong moment was wasted. So she waited. She watched. She learned. She let the CEO show the world exactly who he was. And slowly the CEO began to show signs of insecurity. He noticed numbers dropping. He noticed employees leaving. He noticed that the building didn't feel like it admired him anymore. But instead of correcting his behavior, he became worse, angrier, more impatient, more disrespectful. His ego grew even though the company shrank. The janitor saw it all. She watched him unravel like a thread slowly being pulled apart. She knew something big was coming. Something necessary. Something overdue. Because a leader who thinks he's untouchable always forgets one thing. Someone somewhere is always watching. And in this company, the person watching him the closest was the quiet janitor he never bothered to respect. The woman he believed was beneath him was the one who held all the power he feared. The company was like a small world of its own, full of different people, different personalities, and different hearts. Some employees carried kindness in their hands like warm light. Others carried pride like heavy stones. And between all of them, the janitor moved quietly, pushing her cart through hallways filled with whispers, laughter, complaints, and secrets. She didn't try to fit in, she simply observed. She listened. She learned. Over 15 years, she memorized more than just floor plans and cleaning schedules. She memorized people. There was Daniel from accounting who always stopped to help her lift heavy trash bags. He never made her feel small. Once, when his colleagues teased him for being too soft, he said, "Kindness is not weakness." She never forgot that. There was Maria at reception, gentle, polite, always smiling. She kept a small jar of candies and offered one to the janitor every morning. "Sweet things make hard days easier," she would say. The janitor treasured those tiny moments. But there were also people who made her job heavier. A group of young interns who joked loudly and called her the ghost lady because she moved quietly. They didn't know she heard them laughing behind her back. She forgave them even though the words stung. And then there were those who treated her like she didn't exist at all. They walked past her so fast she felt the wind of their footsteps brush her arm. They pushed her cleaning cart aside without looking at her face. They left messes on purpose, expecting her to clean without question. But she never took revenge. Never reacted. Never let their behavior destroy her dignity. She knew something they didn't. Someday their true selves would be revealed, not by their job titles but by their behavior toward someone with no title at all. The employees often wondered why she worked so hard even when nobody praised her. They didn't understand that she wasn't just cleaning the building, she was studying the culture of the company she had once built with her own hands. She watched how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. And she kept notes. Not written notes, mental ones. She stored every act of kindness, every act of cruelty, every dishonest whisper, and every sincere smile deep inside her memory. The janitor noticed something important. The company was divided. Not in its departments but in spirit. There were people who treated her like a human being. And there were people who treated her like dirt under their shoes. But she never judged too quickly. She believed that life tested everyone differently. She believed some hearts hardened because they were hurt. She believed some people didn't know better because they had never been taught kindness. She gave everyone the benefit of the doubt, even those who didn't deserve it. Still, she paid close attention. She noticed which employees stayed late to fix company problems while the CEO blamed them for delays. She noticed which supervisors smiled in meetings but yelled at subordinates afterward. She noticed which people stole office supplies or lied on reports. She saw everything. She also noticed the ones who defended her when they thought she wasn't listening. Once, she overheard a conversation near the break room. Two employees mocked her slow movements, laughing loudly. Another worker, someone quiet and shy, interrupted and said, "You shouldn't talk like that. She works harder than all of us." They laughed at him too. But the janitor remembered his courage. She placed his name in the good hearts part of her mind. Day by day, she gathered the truth of every person around her, until her understanding of the company was deeper than any manager's report. People didn't treat her well because they thought she was unimportant. But that was exactly why their behavior revealed who they really were. To her, the employees were like pages in a long book. Some pages torn, some pages empty, some pages filled with goodness and some written with arrogance. She read all of them patiently. The CEO was the worst page of all. He openly mocked workers in front of others. He pressured employees until they broke. He blamed the janitor for messes he caused. And every time he walked past her, he made her feel invisible. She remembered every insult, every harsh tone, every disrespectful moment. Sometimes people whispered, "That janitor has the saddest eyes." But her eyes weren't sad, they were full of disappointment. Not because they treated her poorly, but because they treated each other poorly. After 15 years, she knew everything she needed to know, who deserved a better position, who needed guidance, who needed to be removed, and who could help rebuild the company to what she once dreamed it could be. She knew the future of the company didn't depend on the CEO. It depended on the people in the hallways, the ones who never received credit. People had no idea their entire careers were in the hands of the quiet janitor they overlooked. They didn't know she had watched them grow up, make mistakes, improve, fail, succeed, laugh, cry, and struggle. They didn't know she had the power to change their lives at any moment. And they definitely didn't know that soon, very soon, the janitor they ignored was going to rise. And the CEO they feared was going to fall. The company's problems didn't explode in one day. They grew slowly like cracks in a wall, small at first, then deeper, wider, louder. And all along, the janitor watched those cracks spreading, knowing exactly where they came from. Leadership had rotted from the top. The CEO made decisions that looked impressive on paper but broke the spirit of the workplace piece by piece. It started with budget cuts. The CEO announced them proudly, pretending it was a smart financial strategy. But those cuts only affected the lower-level employees. Bonuses disappeared. Overtime was denied. Departments were left understaffed. People were forced to carry workloads that once belonged to 3 or 4 workers. The CEO, meanwhile, approved a brand new leather chair for himself and ordered a renovation of his office, complete with custom flooring imported from Italy. Employees whispered in hallways, stressed and exhausted. The janitor heard everything. She heard the accountant worrying about her sick son and how she couldn't take unpaid leave. She heard 2 customer service reps crying in the break room because they were overwhelmed. She heard the security guard complain that his paycheck was late, again. She heard supervisors arguing quietly about how unqualified the CEO was becoming. But the CEO didn't hear anything. He was too busy planning his next leadership speech, practicing his smile in the mirror and blaming everyone else when numbers fell. One day, the janitor was cleaning near the financial department when she overheard the finance director sigh deeply and whisper to a colleague, "If this continues for 2 more months, we'll be in real trouble." The colleague nodded anxiously. The janitor paused her sweeping, pretending not to listen, but her heart tightened. She wasn't surprised, but she was disappointed. She had built this company carefully, brick by brick, treating it like a plant that needed constant care. And now the person she had trusted to run it had turned it into a withering tree. A week later, the cracks became louder. The CEO called a motivational meeting, forcing all employees to gather in the main hall. He stood at the front like a king addressing his servants. The janitor stood in the back, quietly wiping a glass door while listening. "We must work harder," the CEO declared loudly. "We must give the company our all. If numbers are dropping, it means some of you aren't committed enough." The room stiffened. The janitor's hands froze mid-wipe. He continued, placing a hand dramatically on his chest. "I have sacrificed so much for this company, more than any of you understand." The employees exchanged tired, bitter glances. They knew the real sacrifices came from them, not him. Then, with a show of false sympathy, he added, "As your leader, I have decided to delay all employee benefit reviews until the company stabilizes." The quiet gasp in the room was almost painful. People had been waiting for those reviews for months. Some depended on them for medical bills. Others needed the raise to cover rent. And here he was, casually taking it away, while wearing a new gold watch they all noticed. The janitor felt her jaw tighten. Her hands gripped her mop handle a little too hard. But she stayed quiet. She had to let this play out. She had learned patience like it was an art. Later that day, she saw the CEO in his office, laughing loudly on the phone about how employees always complain too much. He joked about cutting more fat from the bottom. The janitor walked in quietly to clean, and he didn't bother lowering his voice. He didn't care if she heard. To him, she was just a background noise. When she bent down to wipe a stain on the carpet, she heard him say, "Honestly, I run this place alone. Without me, they'd all fall apart." She almost smiled at the irony. The company was already falling apart, but it wasn't because of the workers. It was because of him. The following week brought even more chaos. A client filed a complaint about late reports. A department missed its targets. A partner company canceled a contract. The CEO yelled at everyone but never once looked in the mirror. Employees began leaving. Resignation letters piled on HR's desk. The janitor watched familiar faces walk out the door, shaking their heads in frustration and disappointment. Every night, when the building was empty, she walked through the silent hallways with a heavy heart. She touched desks where hardworking people used to sit. She picked up forgotten coffee mugs and found crumpled tissues from someone who cried quietly during lunch break. She whispered into the empty rooms, "I'm sorry," because she knew she could fix everything, but not yet. Not until the truth revealed itself at the perfect moment. Meanwhile, the CEO became more reckless, more angry, more desperate to hold on to control. He blamed supervisors for losing clients. He blamed HR for the resignations. He blamed marketing for low numbers. He blamed everyone except himself. But the janitor knew the truth. The crisis wasn't just financial. It was moral. It was human. And the CEO's biggest mistake was not the poor decisions, not the failing numbers, not the financial losses. His biggest mistake was believing the janitor didn't matter. Because hidden behind that uniform, behind that broom, behind those silent footsteps, was the real owner. And she was waiting for the exact moment the company would need her the most. The moment that would change everything. The morning of the CEO's biggest mistake began quietly, like any other day. The janitor arrived early as always, pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway with slow, steady steps. She hummed softly to herself, pretending everything was normal even though she could feel a storm forming inside the building. Something in the air felt heavier, tense, sharp, waiting. By mid-morning, the office was buzzing with frustration. Departments were overwhelmed, employees were stressed, and the CEO was in one of his bad moods, which meant the whole building walked on eggshells. The janitor sensed trouble long before it arrived. She had spent years watching people carefully. She knew when a small problem was about to turn into a disaster. Around noon, the CEO burst out of his office holding a stack of papers, his face red with anger. He scanned the hallway angrily, hunting for someone to blame. The janitor happened to be wiping a table near the break room, and unfortunately, she was the first person he saw. "You," he snapped, pointing at her like she was a stain on his perfect day. She paused, cloth in hand, and looked up calmly. "Yes, sir?" "Why is this place such a mess?" he shouted, waving the papers in the air. "Nothing here runs right. Even the cleaning is sloppy." A few employees froze where they stood. Some ducked behind cubicles, afraid to get caught in his rage. Others listened quietly, their hearts sinking. They all knew the janitor worked harder than anyone in the building. The janitor blinked slowly, letting his words pass over her like cold wind. "Sir, I cleaned everything this morning," she said gently. "If something isn't right, I'll fix it." "Fix it?" he barked. "You can't even handle basic tasks. You should be grateful you have this job." His voice rose in volume, echoing down the hallway. "People like you need to learn your place." The words sliced through the room like a knife. The janitor lowered her eyes for a moment, not out of shame but out of deep, controlled restraint. She felt her heart tighten. Employees watched silently, some with anger, some with fear, some with guilt for not stepping in. One young intern whispered under her breath, "This is wrong." Another employee clenched his fists, ready to defend the janitor, but fear chained him still. The CEO wasn't finished. His face burned red as he threw the papers on the floor. "Clean this up," he shouted. "This is what you're good for." The papers scattered across the hallway like broken pieces of dignity. The janitor looked at them quietly. Then she looked up at him, her eyes calm, steady, full of something he couldn't understand. "Sir," she said softly, "you shouldn't speak to people like that." The CEO froze, shocked that the janitor dared speak back. "What did you just say?" he demanded. "I said," she repeated gently, "you should not speak to people like that. Not to me. Not to anyone." The hallway grew silent. Every worker listened. It was the first time she had ever stood up for herself in 15 years. The CEO laughed loudly, mocking, cruel. "You? Teaching me how to talk? You're nothing here." The janitor felt something inside her finally shift. Not anger. Not fear. Something deeper. A line long crossed had disappeared completely. She took a step closer, her voice soft but firm. "Respect does not depend on a job title." The CEO scoffed. "You think you understand business? You think you understand power? You are a nobody in this company." The janitor smiled faintly, a smile filled with truth he couldn't see. "If you say so." Her calmness enraged him further. "You're 1 second away from being fired," he growled. "I'll replace you by tomorrow morning." Employees gasped. Some shook their heads. Some whispered, "He can't do that," but he believed he could. He believed she had no power. He believed wrong. The janitor looked up at him with steady eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, she let a hint of her true strength show. "Sir," she said softly, "I think it's time you stop threatening the people who keep this place alive." "What does that mean?" he demanded. Instead of answering, she bent down slowly and picked up the scattered papers. Not because he ordered her, but because she chose to. Then she placed them neatly on a nearby desk and looked back at him. "We all have limits," she said gently. "Even you." "What nonsense." But he stopped. Because there, in her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Confidence. Authority. Power. It unsettled him. She took a soft breath and said the words that made the room freeze. "You don't understand this company as well as you think you do." The CEO frowned. "What are you talking about?" The janitor turned away from him, returning to her cleaning cart. Her voice drifted over her shoulder, soft but heavy with meaning. "Soon," she said, "you will." Employees stared at her, shock in their eyes. They didn't know what was happening, but they felt it. A shift. A change. A crack in the CEO's power. The janitor walked away, leaving him speechless for the first time in years. He had no idea he had just attacked the one person who had the legal right to end his entire career. And that moment would be the beginning of his downfall. The CEO stormed back into his office, his footsteps shaking the floor, his anger boiling hot like a pot left too long on fire. He slammed the door so hard that the glass window trembled. Inside, he paced back and forth, muttering to himself about the disrespectful janitor, and how people didn't fear him anymore. His pride was wounded, and wounded pride is dangerous. It makes arrogant people think they are losing control. But while the CEO raged behind closed doors, the rest of the office buzzed with a different kind of energy. Employees whispered in corners, stunned at what they had witnessed. The janitor, silent for 15 long years, had finally spoken up. Not with anger. Not with shouting. But with calmness that felt stronger than any yelling could ever be. Some workers admired her bravery. Others felt ashamed that they had never defended her. And some who had mistreated her before felt a heavy guilt pressing on their hearts. They all sensed something big was coming, like a storm slowly rolling over the building. The janitor, meanwhile, pushed her cleaning cart into a quiet storage room and closed the door gently. She leaned against it and let out a long breath she had been holding for years. Her hands trembled, not from fear of the CEO's threats, but from the emotional weight of finally breaking her silence. For 15 years she let insults slide off her like rain. But today something inside her had risen, refusing to bend anymore. She walked to the back of the storage room where a small metal locker stood. It was old, scratched, and dented, just like her uniform, but what was inside could change lives. She placed her hand on the locker door but didn't open it. Not yet. She whispered to herself, soon. Because she knew the CEO's downfall had already begun. Around lunchtime, an emergency meeting was called. The CEO ordered all department heads to gather in the conference room immediately. He wanted to re-establish his authority. He wanted to show everyone that he was still in charge. He wanted the janitor incident forgotten. He stood at the front of the room, his face dark with anger. "We have a discipline problem," he announced, his voice sharp. "Certain employees think they can disrespect leadership. Let me be clear, anyone who challenges me will be removed from this company." The workers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. No one looked at him directly. They all remembered how he humiliated the janitor. One manager raised her hand timidly. "Sir, maybe we should." "Quiet," the CEO snapped. "This is not up for discussion." The door at the back of the room opened quietly. The janitor entered. No one said a word. All eyes turned toward her as she walked slowly, gracefully, with a calmness that felt unshakable. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look angry. She looked ready. The CEO's jaw tightened. "Why are you here?" he barked. "This is a private meeting." The janitor's voice was soft but clear. "I'm here because I need to speak with everyone." The CEO scoffed loudly. "You? Speak? In front of my managers?" She looked at him with quiet sadness. "Yes," she replied. "Because there is something you all deserve to know." Gasps whispered through the room. Managers exchanged confused glances. The CEO stepped forward aggressively. "Leave now," he growled. "Before I fire you on the spot." The janitor met his eyes, unblinking. "You cannot fire me," she said gently. The CEO smirked. "Oh, I can. And I will." She paused for a moment, breathed deeply, then said something that stunned everyone. "Do you know why I have never feared you?" she asked softly. The room fell silent. The CEO's smirk faded. "What nonsense." "Because," she continued, "you do not have the power you think you have." The managers whispered. The CEO's face paled slightly, but he tried to hide it behind anger. "Get out of this room," he shouted. But she didn't move. Instead, she walked to the side of the room, opened her worn-out bag and pulled out a large brown envelope. She placed it on the conference table gently, like it carried the weight of every year she had endured. "What is that?" a manager asked quietly. The janitor looked around the room, her eyes filled with truth. "For 15 years, she said softly, "I have watched this company, my company, fall apart." The CEO laughed harshly. "Your company? You're delusional." The janitor opened the envelope slowly, revealing a neatly stacked set of documents. Ownership papers, founding agreements, legal signatures, board authorizations. The room gasped in shock. The CEO stepped back. Where did you get those?" The janitor lifted her gaze to him, her voice steady and warm. "I didn't get them," she said. "I wrote them." Silence exploded into the room like thunder. Managers stared at her, mouths open, hearts pounding. The CEO's face drained of color completely. He stumbled backward, his hands shaking. The janitor stood tall for the first time in 15 years. No uniform. No mop. No fear. Just truth. And the truth was this. She was the real owner. She had always been the real owner. And now her silence had finally ended. For a long, breathless moment, no one in the room moved. The managers stared at the documents spread across the conference table, their eyes wide, their hands frozen mid-air. Some leaned forward to read the signatures, others covered their mouths in shock, and a few even stepped back as if the truth itself had pushed them. The only sound was the soft hum of the overhead lights, and the pounding heartbeat of the CO, whose world had just cracked open. The CO blinked rapidly, his lips trembling. This is fake, he whispered, though even he didn't believe his own words. His voice wavered like a weak flame in the wind. It has to be fake. The janitor looked at him gently, almost sadly, as if she were watching a child pretend not to be caught. You know it isn't, she said softly. You've seen my signature on company documents before. You just never paid attention. A manager lifted one of the papers with shaking hands. This is the original ownership agreement, she said quietly. The founder's signature, the board approvals. This is older than all of us. Another manager flipped through the pages. Her name matches every legal file. The seal, the stamps, this is real. Whispers spread across the room like a wave. She's the founder? All these years. How did we not know? She was right here the whole time. The CEO's legs nearly gave out beneath him. He grabbed the edge of the table for balance, his breath rising in short panicked bursts. He looked at the janitor, no, the owner, with a mix of disbelief, fear, and anger. You tricked me, he shouted, pointing a shaky finger at her. She shook her head calmly. I didn't trick you. I simply worked among you. It was you who chose not to see me. Managers exchanged uneasy glances. They remembered how many times the CEO boasted that he ran everything. Now they saw the truth. He had been running what someone else quietly owned. Finally, one brave manager stepped forward. Ma'am, she said gently to the janitor, her voice full of respect she'd never shown before. Why would you work as a janitor all these years? The janitor lifted her eyes, and in them was a mixture of pain, patience, and strength earned through years of silence. Because people show their true selves when they think no one important is watching, she said. I wanted to see the heart of this company, its real heart. Another manager swallowed hard. And what did you see? The janitor's eyes flicked toward employees she cherished. Daniel in accounting, Maria at reception, the shy intern who defended her in the break room. Then her gaze shifted toward the CEO, sharp but controlled. I saw kindness in some, she said softly. Cruelty in others. Loyalty, love, ambition, and fear. She paused. But most of all, I saw how leadership changed everything, how one person's selfishness poisoned an entire workplace. The CEO slammed his fist on the table. Enough of this. You think you can just walk in here and take back control? You're a janitor. You don't know how to run a modern company. She looked at him with a steady expression, not angry, not mocking, just disappointed. I know exactly how to run it, she replied. I'm the one who built it. The CEO's face went red with fury. This is insane. I've been CEO for years. You can't dismiss me. The janitor stepped closer, her voice quiet but heavy with authority. I can. And I am. Gasps filled the room. One manager covered her mouth. Another whispered, It's over? You can't fire me, the CEO yelled again desperately now. You don't have the right. She placed both hands on the table, leaning in slightly, her eyes never leaving his. I have every legal right, every moral right, and every reason. The CEO's breathing became uneven. His eyes watered with panic. He looked around the room for support, but no one came to his aid. The managers looked away. The employees stayed silent. The walls themselves felt like they were closing in on him. You have mistreated employees, she said calmly. You have wasted company resources. You have broken trust. You have crushed morale. You have turned my company into a place of fear. Her voice sharpened, but she didn't shout. Her quietness carried more power than his worst screams. You are dismissed. The words echoed through the conference room like a final verdict. The CEO stumbled backward as if physically struck. You can't, he whispered weakly. You can't do this. But she had already turned away from him. Two board-appointed HR officers, who had been summoned quietly by the janitor earlier, stepped forward. The CEO tried to argue, tried to bargain, tried to threaten, but everything he said collapsed into empty air. He had no power left. As they escorted him out, he looked back at her one last time, stunned and broken. The woman he had insulted. The woman he had belittled. The woman he had ignored. Was the owner who had just ended his career. When the conference room door closed behind him, silence resumed. But this time it was a different silence, one filled with respect, awe, and hope. The janitor, no, the owner, stood tall in the center of the room, her presence gentle yet unshakable. And everyone understood one thing. This was the beginning of a new era. The conference room stayed silent long after the CEO was escorted out, as if the building itself needed time to breathe again. The managers didn't know where to look. Some stared at the table, others at the floor, and a few simply stared at the woman they had known for years, but never truly seen. The janitor stood with her hands folded calmly, her uniform still the same, yet she looked completely different now. Not because she changed, because the truth finally had room to shine. She quietly gathered the documents she had revealed and placed them back in the brown envelope. Her movements were slow and steady, like someone who had carried weight for years and finally set it down. When she looked up, the managers lowered their heads out of respect. They no longer saw a janitor. They saw the owner, the founder, the woman with a heart stronger than any title. Finally she spoke. "We have work to do." Her voice wasn't loud, but it echoed through the room with purpose. The managers straightened, ready to listen. Not because they feared her, but because she had earned their respect in a way the former CEO never could. She walked toward the window and looked out at the city below. "For years, this company has lost its way," she said softly. "Not because of the employees. Not because of the workload. But because leadership forgot what matters most, people." The managers nodded, some with tears in their eyes. They remembered the exhaustion, the unfair pressure, the emotional strain of the past years. Her words felt like a release, a balm on old wounds. She continued, "This company was never meant to be a place of fear. It was meant to be a place of growth, kindness, and opportunity." Her voice warmed, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. "I built this company with hope. And I will rebuild it with all of you." Those words made the room feel lighter. Some managers wiped their eyes discreetly. Others exchanged relieved looks. A few even smiled. They had been waiting for something, someone, to bring back meaning to their work. After the meeting, the managers slowly left the room, some approaching her individually. "Thank you for standing up today. We didn't know, but we're grateful. We want to help you rebuild." She nodded kindly to each of them, her heart warming at their sincerity. But not everyone left. One person stayed behind, the young intern who once defended her quietly in the break room. She stood there nervously, twisting her fingers together. "Ma'am?" she said softly. The owner turned to her with a gentle smile. "Yes, dear? I wanted to say I'm sorry," the intern whispered, eyes filling with tears. "I should have done more. I should have spoken up again." The older woman stepped closer, touched the girl's shoulder, and said, "You did something most people wouldn't. You defended someone with no power, when you thought she had no power. That says everything about who you are." The intern burst into tears and hugged her. The owner hugged her back warmly. As the intern left, the owner walked through the hallway, where employees were still whispering about what happened. When they saw her, they straightened their backs, unsure if they should bow, stand, or greet her. She simply smiled and said, "Good afternoon," the same way she always had. But this time the greeting didn't go unnoticed. They answered her with warmth, with respect, with gratitude. The entire atmosphere shifted. People felt lighter, as if chains had fallen from their shoulders. Even the air seemed easier to breathe. Later in the afternoon, the owner went to her small janitor closet, the one she had used for 15 years. She opened the door slowly and looked at the familiar brooms, cleaning supplies, and worn-out cart. She ran her fingers along the handle of the mop she had carried through countless hallways. Then she whispered, "Thank you," as if speaking to an old friend who had protected her secrets for years. She didn't clear the closet. She didn't replace anything. She simply closed the door gently. There was still more to do. She called a general assembly for all employees. When everyone gathered in the main hall, she stepped onto the small stage. No fancy lights, no microphones, just her. Everyone watched with full attention. "For 15 years, she said softly, "I walked among you. I swept these floors. I emptied your trash bins. I cleaned your offices." Her eyes softened. "Not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand you." People exchanged emotional looks. "I have seen your struggles, your kindness, your fears, your dedication. I have seen the best and worst of this company. And today everything changes." A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. From tomorrow, she continued, no more fear. No more disrespect. No more ignoring the voices of the people who hold this company together. We rebuild, with fairness, with humanity, with courage. Employees nodded. Some cried. Some smiled with hope. She ended with a simple sentence. And no one will ever be overlooked again. The hall erupted into applause. Real, emotional, heartfelt applause. The janitor owner stood there with tears in her eyes, not from sadness but from finally being seen. For the first time in 15 years she wasn't alone. The next morning felt different from any other morning the company had ever seen. The sun came through the tall windows with a warm, golden light, almost as if the world outside already knew change had arrived. Employees walked into the building with quiet excitement, their steps lighter, their shoulders relaxed. No one rushed. No one whispered in fear. For the first time in years, the building didn't feel cold. It felt alive. The owner, still wearing her janitor uniform because she hadn't yet removed that chapter of her life, walked through the halls slowly, taking in every corner she once cleaned, every desk she once wiped, every hallway she once swept in silence. But today people greeted her with genuine smiles. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for yesterday. We're here for you. She nodded kindly to each one, her heart warming at the sudden outpouring of respect and gratitude. She didn't need the fancy suit or the high heels. She didn't need a nameplate on the door. The power she carried now came from truth, not appearance. As she approached the lobby, she saw Daniel, the accountant who always helped her lift heavy trash bags. He hurried toward her. Ma'am, yesterday was unforgettable, he said, eyes shining. We all knew things were wrong, but we never knew help was standing right next to us. She smiled softly. You helped me too, Daniel. Kindness is never forgotten. He lowered his head, emotional. For years he had treated her with respect, not knowing she was the owner. That fact alone told her everything she needed to know about his heart. At 10 a.m., the employees gathered again in the main hall for an announcement. But this time, instead of fear, the hall was filled with hope. The owner walked to the front, not with loud footsteps like the old CEO, but with a quiet confidence that demanded attention without ever asking for it. She faced the employees, hundreds of eyes watching her, waiting to hear how their lives would change. Today, she began softly, we start rebuilding this company, together. A wave of relief swept through the crowd. She continued, we will review every policy. We will restore lost benefits. We will fix the departments that were broken. And more importantly, we will fix the way people treat each other. Employees nodded with tears forming, because they had all suffered under the old leadership. This company will no longer be a place where kindness is punished and arrogance is rewarded, she said firmly. Every voice here matters. Every person here matters. Applause broke out, louder and stronger than yesterday's. Some employees even wiped tears from their cheeks. They couldn't believe they finally had a leader who understood their struggles. Then the owner turned toward the front row where the shy intern, the girl who once defended her quietly, stood trying not to cry. You, the owner said gently, showed courage when you didn't have to. Step forward. The intern did, her legs trembling. You defended someone you thought had no power. That kind of heart is rare, the owner continued. You will no longer be an intern. You will join our leadership training program. Gasps filled the hall. The intern covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Thank you, she whispered, tears falling freely. Thank you so much. The owner hugged her gently. People clapped even louder. Next, she called Maria, the receptionist who always gave her a candy each morning. Your kindness has carried me through many hard days, the owner said. From today, you are promoted to Customer Relations Coordinator. Maria started crying immediately, shaking with joy. Then she called Daniel. You have integrity, she said. You will lead the accounting department from now on. Daniel's eyes widened. Ma'am? I don't know what to say. Just continue being who you are, she told him. Promotion after promotion, she raised up those who had treated her, and others, with respect long before knowing she was the owner. But she also addressed the other side. She called forward employees who had bullied, mocked, or belittled others. She didn't shout at them. She didn't embarrass them. Instead, she said, you will have a chance to change. If you choose not to, you will not stay here. Her voice was firm but fair. The room understood. She wasn't a ruler with a crown. She was a leader with a heart. After addressing everyone, she looked at the crowd one last time. For 15 years, I walked these halls unseen, she said. But I saw all of you. I learned from you. And now, together, we will create a company where no one is overlooked again. The entire hall stood up, everyone clapping, cheering, crying, smiling. It was the loudest applause the building had ever heard. As the crowd slowly dispersed, the owner walked quietly toward the janitor closet for the last time. She opened the door and looked at the mop, the broom, the bucket. Tools that had hidden her identity. Tools that had shown her the truth about everyone. She picked up the mop gently and whispered, "Thank you for helping me see their hearts." Then she placed it down one final time. When she closed the closet door, she did so with peace, not because she was leaving behind her past, but because she was stepping into her rightful future. The employees gathered around her, forming a circle of unity. They didn't see a janitor. They didn't see a founder trying to reclaim power. They saw a hero. A leader. A woman who proved that true strength doesn't come from titles, but from character. And as she walked through the hall, no longer invisible, no longer ignored, everyone turned toward her with the respect she always deserved. Her journey as a janitor had ended. Her journey as a leader had finally begun.